The Chrollo vs Hisoka rematch is on its way. The highly man-part-driven battle clown is on a collision course with Mr. Spider Commander himself, with both of them most recently being spotted on Tier 3 of the Black Whale 1. So just how exactly is this going to play out? Chrollo uses Bungee Gum against Hisoka. Look, I don't know if I should be admitting this, but I got genuine chills from reading that comment. The idea of Chrollo obtaining Bungee Gum in a method best described as somehow would be an incredibly crazy twist, forcing Hisoka to think even harder than usual, to fight his way out of everything with texture surprise alone, or whatever potentially new post-mortem powers he has. But I just really like the idea of Chrollo very calmly and collectedly saying the words, Bungee Gum. And then Hisoka's eyes lighting up in terror as he realizes what has happened. Hisoka would probably start to distrust his eyes so much that he would need to whip out his trusty pair of glasses, which he does have, thanks to the Hunter x Hunter collaboration with Zoth, where apparently both Hisoka and Chrollo have their own specially designed frames. Hisoka evoking some very grandfather energy, whilst Chrollo looks like an amalgamation of every high school nerd. It's those thick with so many C's frames that do it. But I suppose the big question is, would it even be possible for Chrollo to steal Hisoka's ability? And this may or may not be a controversial opinion, but I actually don't think that Hisoka would be wildly difficult to steal from, at least not compared to professional trained Nen assassins like Xeno and Silver. Their lifestyle is almost a direct counter to the conditions of Skill Hunter, always being careful and never producing words out loud unless absolutely necessary. Hisoka, however, is a completely different beast. Fighting for him is pleasurable. He takes a lot of time to tease and I suppose whatever the combat equivalent of fluffing his opponent is. So looking at the conditions for Skill Hunter, I think that most of them are met fairly easily. 1. Chrollo needs to see Bungee Gum. That's not a problem because this man has seen so much gum in his life that he is practically an honorary dentist. Hisoka makes no attempt to hide Bungee Gum. Well, that's not true. He does sometimes, but often he hides Bungee Gum by distracting opponents with other applications of Bungee Gum. As for the second condition, Chrollo needs to ask Hisoka a question about Nen and have Hisoka actually answer it. With someone like Xeno, there is no chance whatsoever of getting an answer. However, with Hisoka, he is significantly more likely to play along. A simple question like, I don't know, what does Bungee Gum contain the properties of? And Hisoka, hearing that, he would not be able to help himself. He would feel the need to answer if only for the meme alone. That or he would answer, but he would lie to Chrollo. And that's something I've often wondered about Skill Hunter. This particular condition doesn't specify whether or not the opponent has to answer Chrollo's question truthfully. Taking it as literally worded, it implies that the target just needs to engage with the question. So Chrollo could say something like, hey Hisoka, mate, what are the properties of Bungee Gum? To which Hisoka could respond with, oh, nice of you to ask. It contains the properties of my raging clown phallus, and you know what else contains those same properties? Your mother last night. That's right, Chrollo, I Bungee Gummed your mother. He could say exactly that and the condition might still be fulfilled. But that's the thing about Hisoka in general. Yes, he is an undisputed Nen genius, but he's very playful, and I think for someone like Chrollo, this would be a very easy condition to meet. The trickiest part would be getting Hisoka to touch the cover of the book. That would be something he would be extremely wary of. And you know, it actually brings up the question of whether or not Hisoka actually knows how Skill Hunter works, because I don't think that that's a given. I mean, he definitely understands the latter part of it, that Chrollo can use his stolen skills, but he needs to keep the book open, and there's a bookmark and stuff, etc. Hisoka knows that. But does he know the exact process required to put the ability in the book in the first place? Because Skill Hunter is never actually explained by anyone in the series. Its conditions are specifically told to the readers alone on the cover page of chapter 123. In fact, I would be willing to bet that most of the Phantom Troop don't even know the exact core mechanics of it. And I want to say that I think Hisoka probably doesn't know. Even so, Hisoka is smart enough to know that one probably shouldn't touch another man's Nen conjuration just because it may just happen to be on offer. So Chrollo would need to trick him into it. And again, that's not out of the question because Hisoka is a hand-to-hand fighter. He just goes to give Chrollo a smack and then Chrollo goes, aha, I block with my book. And then bam, ability taken. With the final condition being that all of the above needs to be completed within an hour. And that's not a problem at all because no fight featuring these two is going to last anywhere near that long. The fight battling will simply be too intense. Given that it took Chrollo a year or two to not defeat a far weaker Hisoka, with all the cards stacked against him, I don't think it's a stretch to say that Hisoka wins. This is definitely a big problem. For Chrollo, that is, not Hisoka. This matchup is essentially the world's greatest planner versus the world's greatest improviser. And strangely enough, improvised combat would usually favor the one doing all of the improvising, which is what this is going to be. Chrollo previously took a whole year to plan out his decimation of Hisoka. He controlled everything to perfection, right down to the location. It was in no way a fair fight. With that said, Chrollo is a genius, and is definitely not to be counted out in improvised battle punching. The fact that he survived a direct unplanned conflict against Silver Zoldyck twice is all the information we need to prove that. It's not just the planning though. I think that Chrollo is nigh on unbeatable when he's in his perfect mental zone, and that is not where he is right now. Chrollo is filled with all sorts of fiery emotions that are very well known for impeding all of the logical thinkings. The deaths of Shalnark and Kortopi, or let's be realistic here, the death of Shalnark mainly, has left Chrollo in a very vulnerable mental state. Whereas with Uvogin and Pakunoda, I think there was an understanding. An understanding that Uvogin did a dumb thing and so he got dumb killed and buried in a hole, and also an understanding that Pakunoda sacrificed herself in order to give the troop the insight that all of this is very much their own fault for breeding the beast that is Kurapika in the first place. There's a certain level of respect in both of those cases, because one was beaten by Kurapika's strength in the Phantom Troop, they like strength. Meanwhile, the other was a victim of being strategically outplayed by Kurapika. But with Shalnark and Kortopi, there is a line that is being crossed, because they were completely defenseless and their killing was also quite senseless. It was just done on a whim by Hisoka. Shalnark's death especially is very similar to what happened with Sarasa. They were alone, defenseless, brutally murdered for entertainment, and the corpse was left to be discovered by their friends. So this has really hit Chrollo, and Machi for that matter, a lot harder than Pakunoda and Uvogin did. This is despite the fact that Chrollo had quite the close connection with Pakunoda, so much so that there is actually an official stage play called Hunter x Hunter: A Longing for Pakunoda. Except that title is spelt with her officially Romanized name, so it's actually called Hunter x Hunter: A Longing for Falknustuk. Whoever approved those names, like, ugh. They just took English letters, seemingly at random, and thought, yeah, that probably sounds like Pakunoda. I honestly can't believe that this is real. When I first saw the poster, I was like, this is the cover of a doujin. The other problem for Chrollo, though, is that due to the loss of Kortopi and Shalnark, he's also lost two of the abilities that were integral to defeating Hisoka the first time. Again, it took him a whole year to find the perfect combination of anti-Hisoka measures, and now he needs to do the same thing in a couple of weeks, maybe a couple of days, perhaps even a matter of hours. And given that he may end up mixed in with this whole mafia war business, one really cool idea would be for Chrollo to steal some Heolene Nen abilities because they are the perfect victims. They all have really interesting and versatile powers, but all of them are complete Nen amateurs. They're not going to be thinking about stuff like conditions and restrictions. In fact, they may not even have any concept of that whatsoever. I would bet, like cash money, that the vast majority of them would touch that book in a second, just to do it. They're like, ooh, book, I touch. And then we would see Chrollo do what Chrollo does best, which is taking other people's abilities and using them far better than they ever could. I bet Chrolroth, using Chrollo's officially Romanized data book name there, I bet Chrolroth will have another original Hatsu like his bookmark. Maybe like a book podium he conjures that he can set his book on to free up his hands. I love this idea. I love it a lot. Kind of like a priest using an altar for their Bible. Especially appropriate for Chrollo because this dude is covered in so much religion that I'm pretty sure Michelangelo took inspiration from Chrollo's backside to paint the Sistine Chapel. But it works because it provides balance. The advantage would be that Chrollo can now use up to 2 abilities with 2 hands, whoa, like so. And the price would be that leaving the book on the altar makes it significantly more vulnerable to attack. So Chrollo would achieve a new freedom, but only by imposing a new and honestly pretty harsh restriction. But hey, that is the glorious balance that is the Nen system. It would make switching between abilities quite annoying, so it would probably need to be conjured under the condition of Chrollo discovering 2 abilities that need to be used in tandem with 2 hands. Abilities that give him the versatility to both deal with Hisoka and defend the podium. I don't know what that is, but I do like the idea of adding that layer of combat. Or who knows, maybe Chrollo's new Hatsu could be a library card, allowing him to check out a 3rd ability from Skill Hunter. However, it's only for a very limited amount of time, maybe 60 seconds or something. And if he doesn't return the ability in time, then he will be hit with an overdue Nen fine. How can this man make books and libraries so damn exciting? I predict Chrollo will not fight Hisoka alone. That's interesting because that's exactly what he planned on doing. In fact, that's what everyone planned on doing when Chrollo said, "Alright gang, let's split up, and the first to kill Hisoka wins a prize." But what followed has generally just been the troop gradually getting together and reforming the group, to the point where Team Finks now wants to meet back up with Franklin to guarantee their safety in case some sort of magic battle clown encounter. I also like that what Hisoka said about Chrollo during York New City is still true. Back when he spoke to Kurapika, he said that Chrollo was always accompanied by 2 troop members. And even though it wasn't intentional, that is exactly what's happened here with Shizuku and Benolanov asking to tag along. And speaking of York New, I was going through it the other day and I saw something that made me do a bit of a think. Hisoka revealed that he knew the powers of 7 troop members: Uvogin, Shizuku, Chrollo, Machi, Franklin, Pakunoda, and Shalnark. And later on after that, he would come to learn Kortopi's power as well, so 8. And it's just interesting that all of the dead characters are in that known pile, meaning that Benolanov, Feitan, Nobunaga, Finks, and Kaluto remain completely unknown quantities to Hisoka. Although Benolanov Nolanov has said that his Hatsu doesn't stack up well against Bungee Gum. I also want to know how Hisoka personally power scales the troop, because he is just as bad as every shonen anime fan out there. During the election arc, Hisoka turned up to vote just so that he could power scale the entire Hunter Association, assigning everyone a number out of 100. So I would love to get that insight into how he ranks the troop, because he has a very solid system. I don't know what that system is, but it seems to work for him. Chrollo will win, but will have lost all his comrades. That is so tragically depressing that I can actually see it happening. Tragic because Chrollo finally rids himself of the clown curse, but loses everyone in the process, essentially repeating the Sarasa scenario many times over in such a short period of time, which would kind of make him like a reverse Jesus. Instead of sacrificing himself, all of his disciples end up being sacrificed. And also making a mockery of the Phantom Troop institution by cutting off all of the spider's legs but leaving its head. It certainly is one of the hardest hitting possible outcomes, which would also be tragic for the fan base because we would lose Hisoka. But you know, it could very well be his time. As much as I love him, I don't really know what purpose he would have moving on to the Dark Continent, and this may very well be a great place to wrap up his enigmatic existence as well. Honestly, I don't think it'll happen. I think it'll be a trademark Togashi anticlimax. You know, usually I would agree with the sentiment. I mean, I say this so often that you're all probably sick of hearing it, but you can't treat Hunter x Hunter like a standard story with your setups and your payoffs. Sometimes there's setup without payoff, and sometimes there's payoff without setup. It's just how Togashi writes. However, when it comes to Hisoka, there's not a lot of room for variation. His goal is just that painfully simple. Murder all of the spider people. Full stop. There is no narrative twist that's going to change his mind about that. Even if a York new style event occurred and Chrollo was, say, unable to use Nen again, it's still his time. Hisoka has patiently waited and waited for this fruit to grow, and now it is time to harvest. It ain't much, but it's honest work. And Chrollo's no different, by the way. His sole priority in life right now is to kill murder that there clown. So for this to go any other way, someone would need to kill Chrollo first. Or Hisoka, I guess. But so long as both of them remain alive, this is definitely going to happen. However much time that may take is irrelevant. I mean, Hisoka right now is potentially enjoying himself on tier 1, no doubt bathing, as he always does. In fact, Hisoka is engaged in such a critical mass of bathing throughout the series that the Hunter x Hunter Mombage card game has no less than 6, count 'em 6 variants, featuring Hisoka in a state of undress, engaging in one of his no doubt 5 to 6 baths per day. It's also interesting because like the rarer the cards get, the larger the quantity of Hisoka bathing. So the rarer you get, the more clothes he takes off. And if you want to see some more of Hisoka, clothed or not, then here is another fantastic Hunter x Hunter video, and click it.